All right, folks, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Friday, March 22nd, 2019, broadcasting from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I address black educators today. We got a whole bunch of stories of bad behavior by cops as well as racists, but also Robert Mueller has turned in his report to the Attorney General Bob Barr. The question is, will it show collusion between the Donald Trump campaign and the folks in Russia? We'll talk about that. Also, a black woman in a vicious beating by a white supremacist who didn't like the way she parked her car. Folks, the video is shocking. It is stunning. And why is he not in jail? We'll explain to you. Also, a white supremacist is convicted of murder and hate crimes and the death of a black teenager. We'll tell you about that. A cop pulls a gun and cuffs a man moving into his new home. Yes, let me repeat that. A man moving into his own home, cuffed by a cop. And also online threats of ethnic cleansing closes schools in Charlottesville, Virginia for 2 days in a row. The 17-year-old making the racist threats has been caught. And cops in Elkhart, Indiana face federal charges for beating a man handcuffed to a chair. And Chicago cops beat a man to force him to implicate 5 men in murder charges. We've got the reporter who broke the story. The Black Women's Roundtable releases their annual report on the state of black women. We'll break down the findings. And also, the new Congress is the most diverse in history. But what about the congressional staff? Spencer Overton from the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies is here with the answers. And another ignorant guest on Fox News, folks. He's going to get another history lesson from me. This is becoming a regular occurrence. And Jordan Peele, on his new hit horror film, Us, debuts in theaters, folks. It could be a record breaker. We'll tell you about it. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, just a few moments ago, Robert Mueller turned in his collusion report, or his report about possible collusion between Donald Trump and the Russia, and of course, Russia. He started in May of 2017 and was all about investigating whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to rig the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. A number of people have been indicted. Some have already gone to jail, including Paul Manafort, of course, the campaign manager for Donald Trump. Also, 13 Russians who also were indicted as a result of their hacking as well. Roger Stone also indicted. And so a number of people now, of course, so here's the process. Mueller turned in his report to the Attorney General Bob Barr. He is going to review the report. The Attorney General will decide as to whether or not that report should be released to the public. Democrats in Congress have already been saying the entire report should be released to the public. The other day, Donald Trump was interviewed outside of the White House. He said, of course, the public should be able to see the report. But the question is, will he actually want it to happen? We also know, as a result of Bob Mueller turning in his report, if there are not going to be any more indictments coming from him. That does not mean the Southern District of New York, where he turned over a number of cases, they may very well have some future indictments. Other districts, federal districts with jurisdiction, could potentially have some indictments. That's on the federal level. You still also have the state attorney general in New York. They also have their own investigations as well. But this is going to be a serious issue as to whether or not Bob Mueller, is he going to say that there was no collusion? If so, expect massive gloating from Donald Trump, from the White House, and from Republicans. They're going to say, see, this was a whole waste of time. It's going to just cause him to say it was a witch hunt from the beginning. The question, though, is what if Robert Mueller says that he did find some information, but he could not indict the president? And so it's all based upon what is going to be released. And so that report, again, dropped about an hour ago. Robert Mueller has turned in his report to Attorney General Bob Barr. We shall await to see what happens next. All right, folks, let's go to this shocking story out of Dallas. A black woman was viciously beaten by a white man last night in Dallas. Folks, now again, for all of you out there, this video could be a trigger for some folks. So we are warning you, okay? So here's the deal. Guys, roll the video. This man pulled a gun and slapped the woman's phone out of her hand as she was calling 911. All of this was captured on video. It is shocking and stunning. Now, folks, it started when the man was not happy with how the woman had parked her car. She has not been identified, but the man, Austin Sheffield, has been arrested and charged with assault causing bodily injury, interference with an emergency call, and public intoxication. But the woman's attorney, Lee Merritt, says Sheffield should face felony assault and hate crime charges because he launched into a racist diatribe before the attack. Folks, already, Sheffield, put his photo back up. Already, this racist right here, this man who viciously beat that sister, he is out on bail, but the woman is still in the hospital. Talk about absolutely stunning. Again, that video has been making its rounds all across social media. Folks have been talking about it. Folks have been saying that there's no way in the world that this man should somehow be out and also charged with misdemeanor charges. I want to go to my panel, Dr. Andre Perry, Metropolitan Policy Program, Brookings Institution, Teresa Lundy, founder of TML Communications, Dr. Niambi Carter, Howard University Department of Political Science, and to everybody there with the panel. Again, to see that video, to see how he beat this sister, I don't understand how it's misdemeanor charges, how those are not felony charges for what he did to her.
And and I'll start. Clearly, he went after the phone first. He knew he was going to hurt her badly. Now it's almost protocol for people to try to do away with evidence. And so luckily someone was standing by. But clearly this happens all the time. People want to get rid of any type of effort to record the abuse. But luckily someone was standing by. But it's just vicious and just hard to stomach looking at it.
And I think the addition of the weapon, I think we've overlooked that part. I mean, this man has a gun in his hand. Mm-hmm. That woman could have very well been murdered. And he could have beat her to death. He could have shot her. And as Andre just said, I mean, taking away her phone and her ability to communicate with the police, to flee the scene, he was going after her and using an amount of force that we all can see is much more dangerous than the initial offense, which was he didn't like the way she parked. They had words, and she punches him. He was in no danger. He had a gun. He is physically bigger than her, and he went after her. And the fact that he got a $2,000 bond, I think, is even more insulting than the initial offense.
Teresa, no doubt, for him to pull the weapon out, I'm just not understanding how those charges were as small as they are. I mean, again, that is a that is threatening her with a deadly firearm.
Absolutely. If it was either in an establishment or on the street, that woman's life was in danger. And so when he pulled out that weapon and then the charges that were associated with that, it doesn't look like it matches up. So then we talk about the scale of justice. Obviously, it was miscalculated in the sentencing. And so I always like to go back locally. What are those laws? and those charges and the police officers, their response to it, and the district attorney, because obviously it was not in anyone's favor but this man and man alone, who the woman who suffered this ordeal is still in the hospital.
Again, vicious beating there, and that man, he is out. He is out on bail, and so we'll certainly provide details for you as they become available. All right, folks, some justice when it comes to another white supremacist, Russell Cordier, an avowed white supremacist in Oregon, has been found guilty of murder and hate crime charges for killing a black teenager, Larnell Bruce Jr., by running him over with a Jeep. The murder took place in August of 2016. There wasn't much suspense on the murder charge. Observers thought the hate crimes were going to be difficult to prove because no racist language was used during the attack. However, Cordier was wearing a hat from European Kindred, a white supremacist organization, and did use racist language while in custody. The murder conviction carries a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years behind bars before eligibility for parole. Now, I was going to talk about this on Monday, but I want to squeeze this in right now. Here I just gave you two stories, folks, of white supremacists doing what they do. Of course, we had Charlottesville, of course, where Heather Heyer was actually killed as well. We have a number of other stories out there as well. And so I saw a story today where Secretary Ben Carson, Trump's HUD secretary, said he didn't see any evidence of an increase in white supremacy. How hard is it for a cabinet secretary to look at what the FBI and others are reporting as a dramatic increase of white supremacists in the last 2 years? Of course, the 2 years since Donald Trump is being president. What the hell? Okay, a neurosurgeon, you're supposed to be really smart. What the hell is Ben Carson looking at? Has he paid any attention to the news?
Well, I think it's willful ignorance on the part of Ben Carson to say that. I mean, you can look at any number of our intelligence organizations. You can look online. I mean, you can just look at the number of anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Black hate crimes that we've seen. Tree of Life. I mean, you can go on and on. And so I think this is what he's saying is it hasn't happened to me. So it's not happening to anybody else. And so I think Ben Carson has been very clear about the fact that he doesn't want to address these sort of more systemic violence issues. And the fact that racism language or racist language isn't accompanying the crime, I think, doesn't make it any less hateful, any less violent. This young man is dead. You know, this young woman in Charlottesville is dead because somebody thought that they were less than human. And I think that's the sort of real standard, not whether the language was there or not at the time of the offense.
You know, and also
the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, they have documented this rise in hatred. What in the world is Carson talking about?
Well, there's clearly an association between violence and hate. You don't act this violently without hating someone. But what's also dangerous about Ben Carson is that he's promoting hateful policy, which is also an insidious way to hurt people. And so he's not enforcing many of the anti-discrimination laws for the tenants in his public housing. So it's not only ignoring this explicit violence against people every day, but he's proliferating violence through his unwillingness to enforce policy.
Teresa, I'm going to read this. This is from a Time magazine article. It says that forthcoming analysis of FBI data done in conjunction with Cal State's John Reitzel and West Virginia's University's James Nolan found that November 2016 was the worst month for hate crimes in the U.S. since September 2002, with 758 incidents. Also, a 2017 ABC Washington Post poll found, again, 9% of respondents regarded Nazi views as acceptable. When you look at what is happening all these different places, what we're dealing with is we are dealing with the reality of white extremists, white supremacists who are operating with impunity. And it is luckily because of video, we're able to track these folks down. If
it wasn't for technology, social media, for, yeah, I'll probably just stick with social media, these incidents wouldn't be tracked. We wouldn't be able to have these pollings. We wouldn't be able to have these datas. And moreover, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations today to figure out where some of these instances are coming from and providing better solutions for it. But I do think we need to take a more strategic look on some of the policies locally that needs to change, because sitting and listening to our two panelists, you know, talking about Ben Carson and his ignorance. I mean, if you keep turning a blind eye to this, systemic issues, then I think it's maybe time for you to leave public office and maybe go back to being a brain surgeon.
Let me also read this here. The Southern Poverty Law Center, USA Today reported this in February. The number of hate groups in the United States is the highest in 20 years, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So maybe Ben Carson might want to give them a call if he needs to see evidence for himself. Folks, let's go to this next video. A black man was moving at night into the house he bought in Kansas, about 30 miles west of Kansas City, Kansas. And then this happened.
Police department. Go and set the TV down, man. Set that TV down.
I just bought this house.
You just bought this house and you're moving in at 4 in the morning?
I'm moving in.
All right, go and set that TV down.
All right.
Set it down.
Can you give me a hand?
Set it down. You got your paperwork, man?
Yeah. Hold on.
Is there anybody else here?
No, I'm by myself.
Okay. Go and stay over there. I got backup coming. We're going to talk to you in just a minute, all right? You got guns, knives, or anything like that?
No.
When did you buy the house?
Last month.
All right. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go over there by the side of this house here. I'm going to just put your hands up on the side of the house for me, okay? I'm going to come over and check you for weapons. Okay? You ain't got anything on you, do you?
Just my wallet, my keys, and stuff.
Okay. Okay, go and place your hand on top of your head for me. Okay, these are just going on until we get figured out, okay? Do you have anything with your name saying this is your place?
I sure do.
You do? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, once the other officers here get here, we're going to start looking at it, okay?
All right. Is this all necessary here?
Yeah, because given the circumstances, you're moving in at 3 o'clock in the morning right now, man. And we've been having a lot of break-ins in the area, okay? You said you bought the house.
Yeah.
Do you have paperwork for that?
It's in there.
It's inside?
It's in the kitchen.
Okay. Go and take a seat right there for me, okay?
Yeah, everything's good,
yeah,
man.
Good. Do you understand why I did that? I understand it's not comfortable, but given that we had all those break-ins and whatnot recently, when you see somebody moving
Out here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
here in Tonganoxie.
Yeah.
Here just last weekend we had a whole bunch.
Oh, great.
Right
when I'm just that's real comforting to know.
So
As long as you
I
keep your-
apologize, but
I understand.
if you look at the situation, I think you know you get it.
Well, anyways, keep your car locked and all that, and you won't be a victim of a burglary and all that.
The Kansas chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union said the man, Carl Robinson, a 61-year-old Marine veteran, was harassed for weeks and blocked by the police chief from filing a racial bias complaint with the department. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to understand here. This is the issue with me here. Something similar happened to me in Austin, Texas, when I had recently moved there and I was helping a friend move into her apartment. All these cops showed up. The man was moving stuff into the house, same thing happened to me. We literally were moving stuff, and it was probably when we did it was probably around midnight, and the same thing like, why are you doing it at night? Because we were busy in the day. He was moving stuff into the house, but to cuff him, to detain him. I mean, you can seek proof, but why put handcuffs on a guy?
Well, I mean, I think this is a very clear one. When you buy a house, you have a ton of paperwork, right? So anybody could have said, go in the house and retrieve it, or I'll accompany you in the home and retrieve this paperwork. But as you said, he's moving stuff in, not taking stuff out. He has an identification. He's not resisting. Putting him, I mean, he even says, is this necessary? Putting him in restraints for no other reason than to wait for other officers. I mean, what is he supposed to say at the end of this, right? Yeah, it's no problem, because you're surrounded by 3 people with guns, and you're in your front yard in the middle of the night, and that's not even protection from these kinds of incursions on one's safety and privacy.
Well, I mean,
Teresa, he said, quote, Teresa, Andre, he said, quote, I'd like to see those cops and that chief lose their jobs because this was uncalled for. This is strictly racial profiling.
At its finest. So, I mean, well, one, you know, at the end of the dialogue, I thought it was interesting that the cops said, you know, we had a bunch of burglaries in the area. Meanwhile, the man is wearing all white with a white sports cap. And then when they told him to sit in the truck obviously looked like a U-Haul, lit it as well as he's moving stuff out. So the excuses obviously was something just to cover themselves, knowing that they had a body camera, and then they ended off with giving him tips on how to safeguard yourself and your belongings in your home after, you know, the police just violated your rights and your civil liberties. So I think, moreover, this situation was, yes, like many others that we do. So I think one of the cops, when they said, you understand why we did this, right? The African-American man was, yeah, I get it. I'm in America. And so, you know, I think what he's now suing for, I think he's rightfully so, and the ACLU will definitely have his back.
You know, the other problem is that the police force is clearly protecting white people. You are presumed guilty if you are not welcome in a community. And so the encroachment upon the police, and I don't care what time it is, if it's 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, if that's your property, you have a right to be all over it. And so for the police to come into a person's home, essentially, on their property, is a clear indication that they are protecting white people from black people.
Folks, let's go to our next story. A teenager was arrested Friday for allegedly posting an online threat with racist language targeting specific ethnic groups at Charlottesville High School. 10 public schools in Charlottesville, Virginia were closed yesterday and today. The 17-year-old has not been identified, but was posing as a Charlottesville High School student. He was charged with a felony to threatening to commit serious bodily harm to people on school property. Here's Charlottesville Police Chief Rashal Brackney.
Intolerance is not welcomed in Charlottesville. And in Charlottesville and around the globe, we stand firmly in stating there are not very fine people on both sides of this issue. Thank you.
All right, folks, so let's talk about Elkhart, Indiana, where police lie shockingly. They can also be extremely violent. Check this out. 2 Elkhart, Indiana officers and the man handcuffed to a chair in a police station. Yeah, he was handcuffed to a police station in Elkhart, Indiana. And check out these 2 idiots. Okay, y'all do know that those were the actual surveillance cameras of the police department. Yeah. Corey Newland and Joshua Titus were reprimanded by the police chief. Reprimanded. Then the South Bend Tribune requested video of the incident as part of an ongoing investigation with ProPublica. Then the cops were charged with misdemeanor battery. And yesterday, the 2 were indicted by a federal grand jury for using excessive force against a suspect. Andre, the fact that the police chief reprimanded them as opposed to charging them shows how cops protect cops.
Oh, absolutely. We need some type of third-party arbitration in cases like this. It is clear that police will protect other police while they violate the civil liberties of you and me. And this is another reason why communities they should be fearful of police, because they will not find justice if it's up to the leadership. And this includes all the way up to the police unions, to managers, all the way down to administrative staff. We have to have some type of way to have a third-party arbiter in these types of cases.
Well, that should be the case, but then again, we still have cops who do what they do, and that is, we saw that, of course, that in Chicago, where a man was beaten by cops to frame 5 men for murder. Prosecutors knew his testimony was coerced when they put him on the stand. BuzzFeed reporter Melissa Segura broke the story. We're going to talk to her up next. But again, this is most important, folks. We have to explain again. We have cops who continually beat people, a lot of people, and the problem is prosecutors know there's wrongdoing, but all they care about is a conviction. So we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we'll talk to the BuzzFeed reporter who broke this story. All of this on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
But it wasn't until I became independent and they started messing with my money that I really cared. What's really going on? It's too much that is endangering us, from the food that we eat to the air that we breathe. They are killing us. The climate of our nation now, with Trump just running his mouth and saying senseless things and crazy things, and it was like, and I often now think, who is our voice? You have to have something that has taken place that you care about if it stands for. Someone play devil's advocate. But if you put someone up there that don't look like I do and don't sound the way that I sound and can break it down to me, I'm not listening. And my mother said, girl, don't be no damn fool. But it wasn't until Obama got into office till I really started being more educated about the process and how my voice is really heard through my vote. Now, everybody wants things to be easy. We've had a hardship for a long time. If we allow things to be fun, maybe we can get more people on board, but
All right, folks, so let's go right to a BuzzFeed reporter, Melissa Segura, who broke that story out of Chicago. Melissa, we consistently hear stories out of Chicago about wrongdoing for cops, but to hear the cops beat this man, Francisco Vicente, to frame other individuals, and the prosecutors knew it?
Yes, I think that's sort of the direction that not only our reporting has taken us, but also the direction that a lot of civil rights activists are starting to look at. Is we know, and we've heard for generations, stories of police beatings in Chicago. We know this. There's historical record of it. But what we haven't done, at least thoroughly enough, is take a step back and start asking questions about the systems that have led to so many wrongful convictions in Chicago. And I think the next natural step is to look at the prosecutors and say, hey, these police officers, even if they use the most brutal means necessary, cannot necessarily convert those arrests and those confessions into actual convictions without the help of prosecutors. So I hope that that's the big takeaway that other people, that are readers for the story walk away with, is saying, hey, who else needs to be complicit to turn these, to turn those brutal acts into permanent records, into incarceration?
And look, this is after John Burge, who's now dead, who was a police commander in Chicago, viciously beat a number of black men. Folks went to prison, some for long periods of time, I believe some also for death row. Those men were released. The Chicago had to pay $40 million in reparations as a result. They fought the case all the way through, paid millions more in legal fees for this thug. And so, and this is why people somehow don't seem to understand why the public doesn't trust Chicago police.
Right. I think the other thing that's really interesting about the particular officer that my investigation that I've been writing for the last 2.5 years reveals is that, I think with the Burge instances that you're referring to, we really do have that racial dynamic, and race plays a big factor. And I think a lot of people are able to say, okay, this is a black-white issue. But in the instance that I've covered involving an officer by the name of Detective Ronaldo Guevara, is that he was a Puerto Rican man who did this in a predominantly Latino neighborhood where he grew up. And so I think what this allows us to do is ask a question and say, hey, is this really exclusively about race, or is this very much not only about race, but is it also about the culture of the police department and the way that it interacts with its citizens? And I think that that's sort of an interesting feature of our particular investigation into this officer and to the way that he operated in this community. The other thing that I think is really important is I had somebody on Twitter trolling me saying, you know, this is such a tired narrative. We know all of this about Chicago. But we're not only saying that the injustice is happening to the innocent men who were incarcerated for decades, but what exactly is this saying to the community, to the murder victims? Were their lives not worth a thorough investigation? And that's something that I think, you know, whether you're, you know, on the side, if you say that you're on the side of justice, then you must be on the side of justice for victims of all races, of all beliefs, of all creeds.
What's the status of those cops and the prosecutor? Anything done to either one of them?
Sure. We have seen two things. The first of which is that statute of limitations seems to have run out against a particular officer who's accused of framing more than 50 men for murders that they argue they didn't commit. 19 men have been exonerated in the course of that police work. And there are dozens more who are seeking to have their convictions overturned. And the next phase that we're seeing is just a slew of civil lawsuits that could potentially cost the city of Chicago millions and millions and millions of dollars more. Most recently, a man by the name of Jacques Rivera was awarded $17 million last summer. Another man by the name of Juan Johnson this was back quite some years ago, was awarded a record $21 million before sort of the city had appealed that decision and whittled it down just a little bit. But with each of these cases, I think by my count, I have close to a dozen civil lawsuits that are pending against this particular office. I was really going to take it in the pocketbook. However, the officer is still collecting his pension. Meanwhile, one of the prosecutors we mentioned had previously served on the bench as a criminal court judge for a number of years because of his involvement or the allegations against him in these particular cases on BuzzFeed. He lost his retention, his election to stay on the bench, which hadn't happened in just decades. So that was a pretty unprecedented moment where many of these men who were convicted, or some of these men who were convicted, had spoken out against this particular judge as he campaigned to retain his position.
All right, then, Melissa Segura, first of all, great work there at BuzzFeed. Thank you so very much, and hopefully there will be justice there in Chicago.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
All right, thank you so very much. All right, folks, we've spent lots of time on this show talking about the need for more people of color, more African Americans on Democratic congressional staffs. This is extremely important. The Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, they have been very much involved in pushing for this as well, because when you look at those key positions, African Americans have not been in many of those slots. Joining us right now is Spencer Overton, president of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Spencer, the New York Times did a story the other day talking about the numerous firsts of African Americans on staff there. Of course, we have been pushing this for a couple of years on the Tom Joyner Morning Show, on my old TV1 show, and here as well. So here we are, several months into the new congressional session. What does it look like?
Well, let me just start by saying thank you for your leadership on this. I mean, a lot of this stuff would not move without you bringing attention to it. So you've been there from the beginning in terms of talking directly to like Senator Schumer and other folks, and just every step of the way. So first of all, thanks so much for the platform and getting this message out. So in terms of where we are, there is some commitment from Speaker Pelosi to this issue, and that's certainly appreciated. We've seen some rules adopted in the new Congress, a diversity office set up, which is great. There's some people who are in leadership way up, and when I say leadership, I mean in the Speaker's office, in Hoyer's office. Obviously, you've got Yebby in Congressman Clyburn's office here. But if you look at kind of the rank and file in terms of the members themselves, their chiefs of staff, their legislative directors, their communications directors, we still have a long way to go. So if you just look at the new members, most of the new members have hired all their staff. About 92% of those spots have been filled. And about 21% of those folks are people of color. So that's up above from before when it was 14%, so that's great, but it certainly falls short of the 38% folks of color who are in the country as a whole. So it still falls short. In the Senate, you look at the new members, about 9 new members, there are about 27 new spots there. Only 2 of them are people of color. None of them are black. Now, we have seen some gains in terms of these presidential candidates. So Gillibrand hired a black woman chief of staff. So did Warren, Elizabeth Warren. Kamala Harris has a black LD, and I think she's going to get a new black LD possibly coming up. So we have seen candidates who are running for president take this issue seriously. But still, with the Senate right now, we started off in this in 2015. We had only 3 black folks as top staff. Now we have 8, which is great, but we've basically moved from 1% to 2%. So we still got a lot of work to do.
I know, of course, the panelists there, they've got some thoughts on this and also some questions. So any of you, take it away.
Yeah, I would love the fact that you're pursuing this issue. In the last segment, we heard how important the press is to advance criminal justice issues. Just talk a little bit about the role think tanks and the Joint Center in particular has on pursuing particular issues and advancing this kind of work.
Yeah, well, and you know, you're at a great think tank, Dr. Perry. Lifting up data so that we can see change is important. People aren't going to do things out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to do things if you lift this stuff up, and if we get it outside of the Beltway and folks at home call their member and say, where are you in terms of staff diversity? Is your chief of staff black? Is your communications director black? So really, folks at home being armed with that data and holding their members accountable, that's the key.
And I think that also brings light to some of those presidential candidates who have taken the lead after looking at the data and said, listen, there is a need for diversity and inclusion, and why wait until we get in office? Let's do it right here on our campaigns. And so it does look good, you know, to have senior leadership look like us, especially if the presidential candidate is talking about our issues. I don't, you know, for me personally, don't want to see just, you know, somebody just hired to be a community person on the team to speak about that. But what I do love seeing is those in leadership positions handling that dialogue, the agenda, and also if their candidate hopeful happens to make it, they also will be in the Senate or Congress.
And that's what these members do, right? They'll say something like, well, you know, I've got a black constituency director or a black outreach director or a black diversity coordinator. They're part of my senior team. So they basically try to gerrymander and manipulate their own rule of what a top staffer is. They're basically saying, y'all should be satisfied with this constituency director. You don't need a chief of staff. You don't need a communications director or a legislative director who can direct my policy, right? And we have to set the terms of what we want. We have to set the terms of our liberation. We can't just use someone else's definition of what's good enough for us.
And I also think it opens up the possibility of what we can think about in terms of leadership that doesn't have to be an elected position, because these are really important positions on the Hill. Like, that staff is the conduit to that member. And once you create a pipeline of people who can do that, that's really important, because you need to have people with that kind of institutional memory and that institutional reach that can actually be effective in their jobs, to have those jobs. But if they never get the opportunity to be in those positions and to be in those rooms, we'll never see the level of diversity that we want to see. So I'm actually glad that this is starting, and I think Spencer is right. We have to continue to put that pressure on these members to continue to hire people who are upstarts who really want to do this, because this is a labor that I think unfortunately goes unnoticed and unrecognized, but is a really significant and impactful position or set of positions.
And as Roland has said in the past, these positions, they're pipelines as well. So on one hand, it's how you get to the member, but it's also a pipeline to jobs at big companies, right? It's pipelines to appointments at agencies in terms of being commissioners. So in other words, if you've overseen the committee that confirms people, that's a great way to get to be on the commission or the agency as well, right? Leadership roles in terms of foundations, running for office, etc. So these are also pipeline jobs in terms of leadership in our society. Becoming a judge, a federal judge. Stephen Breyer, right, used to be a top staffer for Kennedy.
So what? So who are the leaders who overrepresented?
At the end of the day, at the end of the day, what we're dealing with is power. Is access to power. And when we're frozen out of these positions, even if somebody may say, well, this is just a lowly committee position, no, you're in the pipeline to power. And that, unfortunately, is the issue there. And so, Spencer, certainly, Andre, real quick with your question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, who's doing it well? Who stood out in terms of elected officials that have an overrepresentation of people of color?
Well, Senator Harris has not done poorly. She's done relatively well in terms of a diverse staff. The senator from Nevada, Cortez Masto, has done a relatively decent job. Interestingly, the CBC as a whole is doing fairly well. They're the most diverse in terms of their top staff. But if you look at these white members, especially white Democrats, on average, their districts are about 37% people of color, and yet only about 8% of their top staff are people of color. Only about 2% of these white Democrats' top staff are black people, right? Wow. And so, you know, the white Democrats are not doing well. Exactly. Transcends party.
And this is why what we have to continue to say, as black folks, we will not remain political sharecroppers. We also want to be in positions of power. Spencer Overton, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your leadership, Roland. Appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Today, the Black Women's Roundtable released their report, Black Women in the United States 2019, called Centering Black Women and Girls' Leadership and Public Policy Agenda in a Polarized Era. Now, on Monday, we had a preview and talked about the increasing political power of black women and the decreasing income insecurity of black women. Now, today, let's look at three more findings with our panel. Now, from the report, over 70% of black women surveyed rated the following issues as very important: affordable health care, criminal justice, policing reform, equal rights and equal pay, hate crimes, racism, jobs, employment, and voting rights. Black women made it clear that their top policy priorities were protecting the safety net programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, as well as access to affordable health care. Going to our panel here now, from the report, according to the most recent federal data, black girls' 12% suspension rate is much higher than girls of any other race and most boys. And research shows that dark girls are suspended and expelled more harshly than those with lighter skin. Now, also, algorithms used by big tech companies and other industries contribute to racial profiling and the systemic and institutional sexism and racism and discrimination that marginalizes black women and makes them vulnerable victims to these algorithms and their ability to decrease opportunities for employment, housing, credit, education, and health care, which harms the economic wealth and well-being of black women, their families, and their communities. I want to start with Teresa first. One of the reasons why this is important is because by being able to specifically identify the views and perspectives of black women, this helps black women and others, whether they are in public office, whether they are volunteering or campaigning on campaigns, or whether they're simply voters, to know how to impact public policy and what we should be asking and demanding of elected officials.
So I think the slew of items that black women are putting on the table are those of quality of life: equal pay, equal pay, criminal justice reform, health care, are the items that, you know, is needed in order to protect them families. But also whoever's elected is to know that when they are making those decisions, when they are thinking about, you know, raising taxes or thinking about, you know, taking, like what they did in New York, taking meat on Tuesdays to help some of the school students. But I'm thinking of a holistic approach of just understanding that their ability to inform them of those issues are better equipped for them to understand what path they need to go and how they need to legislate moving forward.
You know, another critical thing, if black women don't put certain agenda items on the table, they don't go on the table. And so, interestingly, voting rights is one of those issues where white people poll very low on wanting that on the agenda. So if black women don't put this on the agenda, it doesn't happen. But also, if we connect the dots to some of the earlier footage of women getting beaten, clearly black women are powerful politically, but they are not protected. And so the encouraging news about this report is that black women are starting to make inroads in white districts in terms of getting elected. Because the only way you get true protection is to get a hold of policy so that we can put bad cops to jail, so we can put bad prosecutors to jail. And so what's encouraging is that more people are getting elected in unsuspecting places. We've all known that we can get elected in majority black places. We can now get elected in white places. And so, but that has to ultimately translate into policy to protect women, because also black women are a threat. That's why you see so much violence imparted on them.
And I also think, though, this idea of power and how that works, right? Some of this is things you can legislate your way out of, right? We can legislate equal pay. But the other part of these things about maternal care, right? I mean, black women suffer at high rates of infant and maternal mortality. So we know that that's something that we have to educate our medical communities on. Black women talking about they're not listened to in those spaces, that black women are in very precarious positions economically. Their wealth is very minuscule when compared to their white counterparts. When you look at their job types that they have, right? Their employment status that they have do not lead to longer term care and longer term wealth building. And I think what this report does well is show us how all of these things are connected, right? So you have a systemic problem where black women are concerned. So yes, they're making inroads in judgeships, they're making inroads in legislatures, in the state level and the national level, but they're still some of the poorest, the sickest, and the most harmed by these trends toward criminal justice and exclusionary voting rights. I mean, because black girls are not only being suspended, this is also where that prison pipeline starts. And you see black women are being convicted and becoming a larger share of the prison population in this country. So I think what this proposal does, or what this report does, is show us how all of these things are linked together. And they're linked together by white supremacy, which pervades all of our institutions, even the ones that are supposed to care for us. Not just police forces, but medical communities and others who are not supposed to really care about what your race is, but maybe what your humanity is.
And also, I just need to add this, that black women and girls are ignored by and large. We're in Women's History Month, and black teachers, some of the most impactful on students, are ignored. So I like this report, and I encourage people to read it, because we have got to just elevate the voices of black women, because in every aspect of quality life measures, education, politics, health, even, we are getting more control and say on these things, and particularly in education, black women are rising. But there's always an outcome associated with that, and suspension, expulsion, for instance.
Or pay.
And pay, right, that don't reflect the progress. And so until we get that kind of power, sheer power, we're going to see these kind of weird disparities within each sector.
Leave it. All right, then, folks. You can then go to the Black Women's Roundtable and go to the website and actually see the full report. Going to a break right now. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You never find yourself until you face the truth. Entertainer Pearl Bailey.
right, folks, hashtag HBCU Giving Day. Our school of the day is Paul Quinn College, located, first of all, founded in 1872, was initially founded in Waco, Texas. And then, of course, when Bishop College in Dallas shut down, it was moved to that particular campus. And so it's now located on the old campus of Bishop College. It is located now in Dallas, Texas. They're in South Dallas. It was Coma Cottrell, of course, the pioneer hair care owner, Roland, who actually paid for the move of Paul Quinn from Waco to Dallas. His notable graduates include Tony Rose, Mims Hackett, Andy Cooper, Charles E. Jefferson, and many, many more. You want to support Paul Quinn, please go to www.pqc.edu. Again, the website, pqc.edu. And so we always support our HBCUs. And then if you have another HBCU you want to support, please, by all means, contribute to them as well. All right, folks, calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders into the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement the proposal. The deadline to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to fgb.life for more information and to apply. Remember, Ford goes further in our community. We thank them for being a part of partners here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. Also, I'm looking at our live stream, and so I want to make sure that folks right now, if you are on YouTube channel, if you're on Facebook, as well as Periscope, we want you to go to fgb.life to, of course, to register your school. The deadline again is March 31st. Make the thing happen. Then, of course, it's next Saturday. And also, if you're also on YouTube, you can also contribute to being a supporter of Roland Martin Unfiltered simply by giving right there on the YouTube channel as we speak. Remember, every dollar you give goes to support this initiative, what we do every single day, all the great things that we are doing. And so we want you to be able to do that. And so to the folks who give on YouTube, I'm looking at you right now, and I'll give you actually a live shout out right here on the show if you do. So I'll be watching you throughout for the remainder of the show. All right, folks, every single day, it seems, there is somebody who says something absolutely outlandish and crazy about race on Fox News. And I swear, none of these people seem to have paid any attention in history class. Conservative commentator Doug Weed was on Fox News talking about the Electoral College. There's been lots of discussion. Senator Elizabeth Warren and others say it's time to get rid of the Electoral College. Now, Fox described him as a presidential historian. Here are his academic credentials. He attended but did not graduate from Central Bible College in Springfield, Missouri. In 1990, he got an honorary degree from Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's it, which might explain this nonsense.
So, we talk about the Electoral College. Just remind people why this exists in the first place. Why did the Founding Fathers believe this was so important?
Balance, checks and balance, and to give everybody a vote. I mean, we could have the mainstream media in Hollywood and Silicon Valley all just go to a ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in Santa Barbara, California, lock the doors, pick the president, and the country would be at peace. But the people in the rest of the country get to participate too.
Misses a basic point that it actually takes away people's.
Y'all may have okay, you know what? I know some of y'all are thinking that we doctored that video. Play it one more time.
So, we talk about the Electoral College. Just remind people why this exists in the first place. Why did the Founding Fathers believe this was so important?
Balance, checks and balance, and to give everybody a vote. I mean, we could have the mainstream media in Hollywood and Silicon Valley all just go to a ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in Santa Barbara, California, lock the doors, pick the president, and the country would be at peace. But the people in the rest of the country get to participate too.
Okay, folks, here's the deal. What you just heard was absolute and utter nonsense. Let me help Doug Weed, because clearly, since he didn't finish college, and although he has one honorary degree, Doug, I've got 5 of those. Now, and I actually graduated from Texas A&M University. So, the Electoral College, folks, was what we call a slavery compromise. The fear of the popular vote was that because of the plentiful number of slaves, remember we were counted as 3/5, that was this concern as to who would vote. Now let's also take it back. Who was really allowed to vote in America? White male landowners. If you were a man and you owned land, you were able to vote. He said they wanted everybody to vote. No, they didn't. The founders didn't want women to vote because they were not granted the right to vote. They didn't want black folks to vote because we simply weren't even citizens. So they created this system as a way for the rich white landowners to be able to say, if the people vote, and we're going to let them vote, if we disagree with their decision, we're then going to throw it to the Electoral College. Now, y'all might remember in the year 2000, Bush v. Gore. What was decided by the Supreme Court? Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice, wrote in his opinion that there was no affirmative right to vote in the United States Constitution. That had everything been exhausted in Florida, the Florida legislature could have been the ones to make the decision as to who gets the state electoral votes. Now, according to this system, the Electoral College, they can vote any way they want. Some states have actually changed that to require their electors to vote based upon the popular vote in their state. That is not what the Constitution says. So the founders did not want every person to vote. What you really have here is the reason Republicans are supportive of the Electoral College, because in the history of the United States, 3 elections have been decided based upon this drama with the Electoral College. 1876 led to the Great Compromise of 1877, which wasn't even written down. It was sort of a gentleman's agreement. In that particular race, Republicans said, if you allow Hayes to become president, we then are going to cut a deal with you to remove the last federal troop from the 3 remaining state capitals in the South. Democrats said, we'll go along with that, and we won't do anything to the slaves. What ended up happening? The Republicans, they agreed to it. Grant first did it. Hayes removed the final 2 states. Democrats went in, kicked out all of the black state legislators. That led to Jim Crow. In 2000, it went to the Electoral College. It was a contested election where you had Al Gore, who got more popular votes than George W. Bush. Drama in Florida. Election goes to the Supreme Court. They essentially ruled for George W. Bush. And then in 2016, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. But because of the Electoral College, it goes to Donald Trump. Weed is a liar. They want to keep talking about how the framers set this up, and they want to leave out that it was a slavery compromise. Folks, the Electoral College is antiquated. In fact, Matt Lewis, if the folks in the control room, if you could go to Twitter and go to the Twitter feed of Matt Lewis, I want to bring this up and I want to show this to our panel. I'm going to show you this real quick. He tweeted out today about, well, guys, you can. He tweeted out today, y'all going to love this one. He tweeted out today about, how all of this rural land is that that if we get rid of the Electoral College, there's no way Republicans would be able to win. If we showed you the map of 2016, you're going to see lots of red. Only less than 20% of the American population lives in rural America. Folks, 80% of America lives in non-rural places. And Republicans also live in those places. So when you hear people lie why we have to keep the Electoral College, understand it was all about slavery when it was set up. So if slavery no longer exists, don't you think we should get rid of the slavery compromise? I think so. All right, folks, real quick here. Us opens this weekend. It is the new horror film by Jordan Peele. He, of course, is the director and the writer. Talked about the importance of the film and why he wanted black folks in a horror classic.
You know, the Crazy Ride, it's meant to be terrifying. I can tell you, look, I would tell you less than the trailer tells you, okay? So I would say a woman as a child has a trauma, and she grows up, and that trauma comes back to haunt her, and that trauma has brought its family.
You know how sometimes things line up? Coincidences? Since we've been up here, they've been happening more and more. It's like there's this black cloud hanging over us.
When I was a kid, I saw this episode of Twilight Zone called Mirror Image, which was written by Rod Serling about a doppelganger at a train station, and it scared me. I used to think about a doppelganger across the subway platform as a kid. So I always had that. I always start with something that every time I think about it, it scares me, because that's my engine. That's my horror engine. From there, I thought about what is that about, and really I studied doppelgangers. I went and this idea of the shadow self, which comes up in many cultures, many mythologies. And it tends to be this sense that there is a darker self that we suppress, and we suppress it because we are afraid of what it means, and it holds our guilts and our evil, really.
All right, folks. So according to the initial estimates, Us could earn anywhere from $35 to $40 million this weekend. That was about a month ago. Well, based upon how it is trending right now, the movie could exceed some $65 million this weekend, and it could be the #1 movie at the box office. Already after, of course, his huge hit, Get Out. And so I'm looking on boxofficemojo.com. Thursday night, Us did 7.4. The headline said Jordan Peele's Us delivers an eye-popping $7.4 million in previews. And so talk about a huge number here. And so we'll see what happens this weekend. And so we certainly hope you go see Us and support what Jordan Peele is doing. And as he said, the black people live to the end. That don't happen in horror films. Praise the Lord. It's a black director. All right, final comment from our panelists. Anything in the news this week you want to make a final comment on? Diami, go.
Well, I would just say we need to be watching this Mueller report. I think it'll be interesting what he says in there. I mean, even if the word collusion doesn't appear, I think we're going to see something. And so I'm looking forward to taking a bite out of that this next few days.
Niambi Carter, thanks a bunch.
Thank you,
Andre.
Roland.
No, I'm going to the movies. I'm going to put aside the Mueller report. That's going to happen. Go to the movies and support Jordan Peele.
Andre Perry, thanks a bunch. Teresa.
I'm just going to be following social media. I know that R. Kelly has been, he went to court today. And so I'll be following up on that story and seeing what other good news is coming as it relates to justice for those women.
And folks, what Teresa's talking about, R. Kelly's lawyers went to court because he wants to go perform in the United Arab Emirates and meet the royal family. Has to get approved from the court because he took his passport. So we'll see if that happens. He needs that check. That's why he's trying to go. But y'all know he might try to stay. I don't think the judge is going to let it. All right, Pamela, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Roland.
And again, folks, if you want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered, please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We want you to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar you give to support the show goes to it, and so we certainly want you to do so. I'm looking on here. I've got some people who just want to double check if folks had contributed, and so I'm looking. And so, again, please, we want you to support the show. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com to join our Bring the Funk fan club. We're going to end the show, of course, playing right now. This is a list of all of our donors. And here's the deal. Some of you, if you've given and don't see your name, just shoot me an email. We'll actually get it taken care of and be able to put your name on the list. We run this every single Friday. And also, coming up next, we're going to end this live stream. And coming up next, we're going to have my one-on-one with actress Lisa Ray talking about voting, talking about how she got so focused when it comes to public policy and why it matters. And so, folks, I'll be back in D.C. on Monday. I'm here in Fort Lauderdale. Got to also give a shout out to the folks who I spoke to here, and that is, there was an educational conference here, and it was put on at Dillard High School by the Black Alliance of Black School Educators. And so at historic Dillard High School, so I want to thank all of them. They're located in the same district as Parkland High School. Had a chance to meet the superintendent. We're going to have him soon on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And so glad to see all the folks there. And they're going to also get me the video so we can live stream my speech and those of the others that took place there as well. All right, folks, you have yourselves a great, great weekend. I'll see you guys on Monday. And remember, come right back, because you do not want to miss this conversation I had with Lisa Ray. It is indeed powerful. Holla! You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.